I'm extremely excited to speak with all of you, our wonderful Cylance customers. We've been on a long journey together the last, what, 4, 5, 6 years now. I'm extremely excited about this presentation because it lets us know where we're headed together. And by way of introduction, for those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm Scott Scheferman, Senior Director of Global Services. And I've been here at Cylance for probably 3 years or so. Before that, 17 years supporting the DoD and intelligence communities. And I've really come to understand the vendor space in the last 3 years here at Cylance in a way that I never anticipated before. What I've really appreciated the most is aligning what we do to what you might call an organization's mission. And that's exactly what we intend to support. In fact, our mission is to support every user and protect them, every user under the sun and every device under the sun. And we'll talk about that more, especially now that we are a BlackBerry Cylance, which we'll conclude with at the end of this presentation. So without further ado, so yeah, we've come a long way. So we're going to talk about where we've been, where we are, and then where we are headed at the end. It'll kind of be like going on a roller coaster ride at Santa Cruz, where the biggest drop is kind of saved for the end, and I can't wait to get you there. So as we go through this deck, what I really want you to get out of this, one thing to walk away at least, is the ability to message inside your organizations why you've partnered with an AI company called BlackBerry Cylance, and what that means going forward, and why it's so important to have done so. So let's start in the news. So it's always great to start within the news. I would love to see a show of hands, but I can't. But I'd love to see a show of hands. How many people heard about the Shadowhammer event that was revealed yesterday in the news? Basically another supply chain attack, much like CCleaner, that I know many of you have had to deal with. And it's one of those ones by the Chinese Barium group. They go by a lot of other names as well, but they were the same ones likely behind CCleaner that has just done this attack against ASUS. The interesting thing about this is it's quite serious, because ASUS themselves hosted the malicious updater file for ASUS laptops, right? And it was hosted for about 6 months, and between 500,000 and 1 million folks have probably downloaded that backdoored installer on their ASUS laptops. And then what we learned yesterday was that installer would go through and look for a set of MAC addresses. We know at least of 600. There's probably many, many more that are being targeted. So it's a very targeted attack, hosted by ASUS's official website, signed by an official ASUS cert, the software was, that was missing a date field. And for those analysts in the field, you will laugh at that. And lo and behold, I mean, it was predicted, if you take this Yara screenshot here on the right, and you look at those hashes and some of the other IOC servers, if you just look at the hashes, we ran those same binaries against a model from 2 years ago, and we found that we predicted and blocked and prevented those from ever executing. Half of them 2 years ago, and the other half over a month before this campaign was discovered. So let me just see this chat right here. Okay, so yeah, I'm reading the chat just to make sure other people are able to see this okay. I think I'm okay. Let me know if I'm not. Surely you can break in and let me know, but I'll keep going otherwise. And hopefully all of you guys can connect successfully. Okay, thank you, Shirley. So continuing on, so that's in the news. Locker Goga's in the news. I don't have a slide on that, but another one of those crazy attacks, much like, I don't know, NotPetya with some TTPs like SamSam. And what we're seeing in a lot of these attacks, and we'll look at another threat actor like Fin5, that, you know, there's a lot of living off the land going on. But before we talk about living off the land, let's make one thing clear. You know, show of hands again, how many people know about the MITRE attack framework? Well, everybody does, because these days it's ubiquitous. It is literally kind of the new, Lockheed Martin kill chain, if you will. And if you look at the MITRE attack framework, you see all of the threat actors. There's about 78 or so of these APT known identified acting groups, and one of there is highlighted in white. That's Barium, that's the folks behind the Shadowhammer attack yesterday. And all the other ones you recognize as well, right? All the APTs, etc. But all of them are still using malware, right? So I just want us to realize that malware is still, by and large, the way the vast, vast, vast majority of attacks still continue to hit the enterprise. And the industry tends to size things up by saying it's like malware versus fileless, or malware versus living off. There's no versus here. These attack kill chains usually involve a lot of both. And so we have to understand that as we go forward in this deck. And we'll look at an example of with Fin5 as well in terms of living off the land and fileless aspects as well. So one of the things in the past that Cylance has articulated that we focus on is our time advantage over the bad guy, if you will. So if you think about automation and speed on the part of the attacker, they're in red because red is bad, right? On the vertical axis. And then on the horizontal axis, time itself. And you look at this line, it's kind of like that's how we've evolved as an industry, information security, cybersecurity now, whatever. We've kind of gone linearly, but the bad guys, of course, haven't waited around. They tend to exponentially get faster, more automated, more stealthy. Their speed to compromise, right, is faster than our ability to detect. And so they've had this time advantage that pretty much represents the risk gap to your organization and your organization's mission. So what Cylance, realized, what Stuart McClure, Ryan and Perma, our founders, realized is we need to approach this problem differently and give ourselves a time advantage. And that's when you kind of see the green line eclipse the red line. And from there on, we have a predictive advantage powered by a narrow predictive AI that is now many months or years, we have a slide in a moment that will express that, advantage over the enemy. And that's absolutely critical. As you talk about this kind of malware economy and the mobilization of malware, we really need to realize that we need to restore time to the defender's advantage, and that's really what we've set out to do. We did some initial research a few years ago. It was actually when Solar and Strider, the second one from the bottom, first came out. It was during a Black Hat, I think of 2016 or so. And at the end of this report, now this at the time was the most advanced, prolific, sophisticated type of APT attack ever, using binary large objects, using Lua programming language, if I remember right, etc. And at the end of this report, I think in the semantic report, there's like 15 or so hashes of binaries and IOCs. And so we had an idea, let's run those against our old product, because you know what, we've been doing this for a while. We say we have a predictive advantage, let's test it. And lo and behold, we got all of those binaries. And at the time we did this test, we got them 18 months before all of industry, all of signature-based industry, any kind of human race technology whatsoever was able to even understand that this campaign had been underway. And so that 18-month window, if you will, that time advantage was striking to us. And so we did additional initial research, and here it is represented in terms of the number of months we're ahead of things. But if you look at like Zcryptor, one of those, if you remember 2016, Zcryptor blew through like Microsoft Defender, EMET, and all these other kind of stacks we had on the endpoint because it was so stealthy as a ransomware. But we had a 6-month advantage before the first patient zero ever happened in the wild. And if you think what that means over the enemy, the bad guys, is we actually were pre-inception, before they even conceived of their malware campaign, the ransomware campaign, before they picked their crypto, before they picked their schema, before they did their C2, before any of their infrastructure, chose a Bitcoin or not to use, etc. We were ahead of all that. And sure enough, we actually got SE Labs, a third party, to test us against their, repository of the worst malware. And they found that across all that malware, we had an average of 25 months predictive advantage over everything they threw at us. And to us, that was actually remarkable, over 2 years, right? So, all right, I think you guys get it, especially as customers, but I want us to maintain this momentum, because what we see in terms of how this affects our organization is represented by the next couple of slides that I'll build out via automation. If you think about the kill chain on the bottom, moving left to right as kill chains tend to do, right? You have the malware economy, whatever happens there. At some point, they try to execute malware. Then there's a callback, there's lateral movement. And at some point, they get your credentials. And then there's data exfiltration at the back end, right? Genie's out of the bottle. But let's look at like the amount of risk and work you can do before execution. There's not a whole lot. Maybe an email filter and maybe some threat intelligence coming from the deep dark web on domain squatting using hackeries. But really, the bulk of the problem, the security problem, if you go to RSA and you look around and you're overwhelmed by blue lights, it's because this problem space, it's all the risk represented between primarily execution and credential part of this kill chain. It's the hardest part of doing the job, the lateral movement, all the living off the land, all the PowerShell, all the command and control ways of obfuscation, everything that, execution itself, anything that's in this space is the hard work and also represents the risk to the organization. And if you get to credentials, the genie's out of the bottle. By and large, we do hundreds of IRs a year, hundreds, thousands of compromise assessments, right, we've done. And by and large, once credentials are popped, the rest of the bad thing is going to happen, and you're not often able to get ahead of it. The genie's out of the bottle. So now let's look at life with a predictive advantage, right? And this is ends up being an analog with where we're going with our unified agent we'll speak about at the end of the presentation. But really, if you think about what we've done there on the left is in blue. AI has done the hard work ahead of time so that you don't have to. We've done this prediction pre-execution so that the endpoint finally gets quieted. Now, when I say we've done the hard work, I want you to realize this is not some black magic, fancy math thing we did. This is a very heavy lift. It's like 40,000 CPU cores we spin up in AWS, creating a tremendous amount of heat, doing this once or twice a year to create these new models. And we're looking at over 1 billion files and many hundreds of thousands of features across those files. If you look at the number of features you can extract from one PE, it's literally 4.8 times 10 to the 344th power. Put that in a calculator, it comes back and it literally reads out the word infinity. Try it on your laptop or phone. It's hilarious. But out of those, out of that infinity feature set, we're looking at 300 billion features, and in ways that humans don't even know how to look at those features to correlate and understand what the known universe of bad software actually is. But we've done the work ahead of time. And the point is, in the middle, where there was a bunch of red horizontal lines and risk, now there's only a signal. And that signal is what allows you, and as an organization, to finally lean forward. It's literally why you bought Cylance, why you are our partners. It's so that you can turn all these pain points of alert fatigue and correlating and doing all the stuff up in the cloud after you've enriched it and vectorized it and everything else. And we also have AIs for optics to handle that middle section, but now it's a signal. It's not a noisy, massive cloud of work. And we'll talk about persona as well when it comes to compromised user accounts, but there are ways to apply AI to these key critical choke points in any kill chain. And so we turn these points of pain into what I like to call points of joy for the organization. The bottom right, positive ROI. How many security solutions in the world have ever given you an actual positive return on investment, right? So here we go. You get it, right? So here is a legacy notional kill chain that you've probably seen me present in years past. Again, this is the linear version, like a Lockheed Martin kill chain, and execution sits right where it does on purpose. When we do our compromise assessments, the stuff there in the green, again, is that bulk area. So this is how we used to talk about things as industry, but the last 3 or 4 years, right, examples, we've actually seen the industry go towards the MITRE attack framework, right? It's a much broader set across 11 areas of tactics. See initial access on the left. It does kind of move left to right-ish, but C2 is over on the far right for some reason. No matter. Underneath these giant categories of tactics, there are those numbers, which are the set of techniques that we as an industry have contributed to the MITRE attack framework, and they have extracted and say, these are the ways we know the bad APT groups, like those 78 groups we saw in the beginning of this deck, know how to do things underneath these tactic categories, right? So this is like the world of MITRE attack through a lens. And we'll continue to use this lens as we build out. Of course, I have another deck that goes for an hour where I talk about all the TTPs and all the tactics, I should say, associated with each of these tactics. And the ones in white are ones that you recognize right off the bat as giving you problems, right? Causing you pain, emotet. But one of the things that's common about all of these tactics today is that they're all seem to be moving at what you might call the speed of computing. They're automated, they're scripted out, the exfiltration or the destruction can happen almost automatically. The second a button's hit across a SamSam environment or like Locker Gaga. There's so much going on right now that's moving so fast that if you're not addressing it or able to address it at the endpoint, and if you're waiting on the cloud to do the correlation for you to tell you something bad has happened with an ED at the end in past tense, it's going to be too late for you for some of these fast-moving destructive worms, for example. So we'll look at this, and we'll use Fin5, right? Anybody financial on the call will recognize these guys right away. They're the folks behind raw point-of-sale, raw POS software, targeting carding data on POS endpoints, of course. These guys have been around 10 years, killing it. One of the reasons they're killing it is they're not using 0 days. They're not using remote exploits like Eternal Blue and anything else that comes up, struts, etc. They're not using spear phishing, which we still say a vast majority of attacks normally use. Instead, they're hiding out in easy land. They're literally using all of the credential dumps that have been taking place over the last several years that are constantly ahead of our password policies and our ability to manage those identities. And actually, pause there. There's over 10 billion records out there of our username passwords. There's only like 6 or 7 billion people the last time I checked on Earth. Do we have a problem with passwords? Are passwords dead? Yes, passwords are dead, but from a bad guy's perspective, like Fin5, long-live passwords, because they are using them to get into RDP. They're popping them. They're working with POS vendors subversively to obtain those password lists to go right into the organization. Anyway, so you get the idea of what Fin5 is about and how they kind of live off the land and use creds rather than use, you know, malware and all the other things, right? So they do use malware, raw POS, but that happens at the end of their kill chain, right? See how it goes? So MITRE ATT&CK covers a lot of what they do, but not all of their TTPs. We know because we've dealt with these guys in our IRs a ton. This is a screenshot of the tools that MITRE ATT&CK says that they use, and it's completely accurate. It might not be the whole set, but it's true. And what you get out of this is basically these guys are using legitimate stolen creds like we talked about, and they're largely using living off the land or LOL fileless type of attacks. We won't go into the industry jargon around what we mean by fileless. Usually fileless actually does include a file, you know, PowerShell or writing to the registry, writing to disk or something like that, but we won't go into that. We'll just describe these guys as basically living off the land, and for our purposes, that's what we mean by fileless, right? And you go across all these different tactics that they've used, you know, eternal remote services, credential dumping, redundant access, right? So I'm gonna map out across the top those tactics that these guys are known to use. And the ones in blue there at the end are ones that MITRE ATT&CK doesn't account for. So everything you see here, I've pulled from MITRE ATT&CK and just plopped into the same lens that we've been looking at. And if you look across the bottom, you see there's about 15 different individual techniques under those respective tactics in whole that we as a human race and industry understand about Fin5. And so now as Cylance customers, you're saying, okay, cool, show me how you guys address this. Show me your coverage, right? Because the industry's coming at you hard. Post RSA, there's a lot of third-party testing saying, show me your MITRE ATT&CK coverage. And I have air quotes around the word coverage. And before I show you, realize something about this, and we'll message more about this in the future for your benefit. If you have an organization or a software solution that has, let's say, 100% coverage with MITRE ATT&CK, you should really scratch your head and ask yourself, what does that actually mean? Because we just saw there's 78 user groups across 200 different techniques, and the methods of those techniques, the sub-techniques, if you will, a MITRE ATT&CK test might just check for one registry persistence setting, but there's 5 other ones. And if you just get that one, you get a checkbox, and you have now MITRE coverage underneath that method of persistence, and you're good, and you're moving on. So it's easy for any vendor to get full coverage per se, but do you actually have full coverage as a vendor? It's an empty statement. It literally doesn't mean anything. There's no framework on earth that keeps up with the entire landscape of all the threat actors over the last 20 years all together, with emphasis. So that said, let's go back to how Cylance would stop this, right? So obviously execution, the raw POS malware itself, predictive, pre-execution prevention, that's the Cylance Protect shield that you're all familiar with. Then you have Cylance Optics, right? These color shields, these shields would indicate to you where with Cylance Optics we would be able to detect, and even if you wanted to block those types of actions of living off the land, moving around, collecting data, gaining credential access or escalating privilege, etc., right? And then the white optic shields are there just to show you that we also have the ability to detect any number of these other things that happen. Maybe you don't block because of there's like physics reasons why you wouldn't want to block certain things without vetting them first. Those kind of things, right? So you're kind of your classic EDR of after the fact. We can do that too, like everybody else. But really focus on the fact that you have this green shield on the left and the 4 colored in optic shields that say, you know what? I can have enough intelligence on the endpoint to understand when bad things are happening and interject this kill chain at the same machine speed that these guys are trying to move, or attack speed that they're trying to move, and get ahead of them so that they never get to the raw POS part of their kill chain. They never get the pull carding data, let alone exfiltrate it, right? This is the goal of what we're trying to do in the industry, is get ahead, shift left, all the words. But here you see how we kind of map to it, okay? This slide is on purpose an eyesore. But I want you to realize if you were to only do things after the fact, up in the cloud, in your SIM, after the fact, and enrich it, and then understand all your events and pivot and correlate and hunt and figure out what happened with root cause by manually pivoting as an analyst, you would end up with a story that's kind of like this based on one of the lab demos we did around Fin5, right? One of our own kind of recreate what they might do things. And all of these things are things that an expert needs to look out, vet, make sure there aren't false positives, correlate, put together timeline, etc. But wouldn't it be nice if you could just prevent this stuff from happening at the same speed that the attack happens and interject meaningfully? So I want this slide to be an eyesore because I want to get rid of this eyesore in your lives. So we throw this slide away and we say, no, we'll get early on enough in the kill chain. When we replay this, it took us about 45 seconds to move laterally just by living off the land. Right? I have a demo from a past talk I did where it's just like, how? We talk about dwell time in the industry going from 400 days down to like less than 100 days, and we're supposed to be happy as human beings. No, 45 seconds. I think Stu and Brian Robinson are doing demos now where it's like 5 seconds. They've already moved laterally via automated scripts, right? So yeah, so we want to get rid of this noise for you, and that's the whole point. Okay, so some things, bad things do happen. And one of the things that you guys have as optics customers now is this amazing tool set. It's a Swiss Army knife. It sits there on the endpoint, right? Taking up very little resources, but when you need it, it's there for you. It can push or pull any kind of software or data you want to from the endpoint. It's quite amazing. You want to pull a forensics package? Absolutely do that. If you have third-party applications you need to push in the face of something like a WannaCry attack, if you have a workaround that will prevent a worm from spreading, if you just change flip a bit in a registry, we can do that. If you want to apply patches like MS017 because Eternal Blue is trying to spread through your network with double pulsar as a worming technology, let's do that. Because you can now with Cylance Optics, right? And better yet at the end, and we'll say this a little bit, but we have these playbooks that you can orchestrate in your environment because you know your environment, you know your workflows, right? Or if you don't, our services will help you do that. But you can automate this now. And so let's get rid of all the heavy lift that a human has to do all the time. If we know with super high confidence coming from the endpoint that a bad thing is happening, let's automate those playbooks, pull those packages, make those changes, whatever we need to do. It's a hugely powerful tool, and I think you guys as a user community are on fire about the automated playbook aspect of optics these days. And the other thing with optics is it's got this amazing API, right? So via API now, you don't even have to go to the console. You can request an instant query. You can look at a focus view and get to root cause analysis. You can publish and update, even delete your context engine rules, exceptions, I'm reading off the slide because there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. That's the whole point. Service lockdown commands to endpoints, retrieve arbitrary files from endpoints. Doesn't sound like much to say arbitrary files, but that's the universe of files on your endpoints you probably need to pull when bad things are happening. You can finally do that now via API. Okay, so I'm super happy we gave this to you because you were clamoring for it, and I'm super glad it's in your hands. We see success with this all the day in the field, every day when we do services around optics. It's amazing. Syslog, another thing you can obviously, if you're at RSA, you saw somebody from Splunk present at our booth, and they were talking about how with Syslog now it's so great because you could pull all our context analysis engine feeds directly into Splunk, right? You can automate all the workflows for receiving that. You can triage right away. You want to triage off of Cylance intelligence, whether it's a malware detection with a high confidence because AI says it's high confidence, or it's a high confidence context analysis engine hit. Anything that's high confidence is high fidelity coming from your endpoint is solid gold in Splunk land. And you know this better than I do, but just realize this is all now Syslog happy. So you get the stuff right away, you're pivoting right away, you already know where to start in terms of triage and priority. And then this is a slide that just visually, I think it's an awesome graphic, by the way, whoever did this, but this visually gives you a wonderful look into the different areas where we have this alliance called Axiom that we work off that continues to grow, even beyond the logos that you see here, which are all wonderful. Everything from Demisto with SOAR, Logarithm, just Splunk, obviously our friends at JASK, Thycotic, BitGlass, and for CASB. I mean, around the circle, you see some high quality folks that we're fully integrated with now. And then I sort of like to say there's much more and we can talk to you about it. Okay, so I got to my favorite part of the whole thing, right? I told you we're going on a roller coaster. Now it's time to click, click, click towards the top. Now it's time to go down. And hopefully you're keeping up with my pace because like we said, we have a lot to cover. So we've built this thing and we've been hard at work at it, probably 18, 20 months now or so. And we've built this thing that's a Cylance AI platform. Now every vendor says they have a platform. We get it. But this is new. This is an AI platform. This is a native AI agent sitting on all of your endpoints using shared resources with microservices architecture. We'll go through this in a moment. But it's new because it future-proofs you. This is getting us set up to use maths and machine learning and AIs going forward off of the endpoint where it matters, because the endpoint is still the nexus of the problem, whether it's an identity problem, an exfiltration problem, a user problem, obviously malicious actors doing stuff problem, malicious insiders problem, it all still happens at the endpoint. So we've built this agent to live where it matters. And we built this agent so we can hot plug in new machine learning models that help us solve things with high fidelity, high confidence in the future. This is why you're still partnered with Cylance, because you know we can bring this to you. If you look at this platform and kind of from this perspective here, you see that it's all about the outer ring. Everything we do here, as you already know, is about prevention. It's not just predicting malware pre-execution. It's also pushing the intelligence down to, let's say, optics, where we know we can make decisions in real time and automate things like playbooks and responses to interject the kill chain and shift left to stop it before the bad thing actually happens meaningfully without the cloud, without sending your private data, your privacy, your GDPR worry data up to the cloud, etc. Right? And you'll see us do this in a future-looking product as well towards the end of the deck I'm about to get to. I'm so excited about. So everything Cylance does, we push down to the intelligence down to the local device. We try not to push things up we don't need because that's bad for privacy, etc. We have the ability to focus data science where it needs to be, and this enables our Axiom Alliance that we just saw to actually use this meaningfully. This enables our OEM products to actually use a very lightweight integrated shared services agent on their respective OEM endpoints, if you will, in a wonderful way, and also future-proof them to do math on their OEM devices. This is literally where we've built the endpoint future, is what I'm trying to say if I haven't said it loud enough. There's many benefits to this, right? Features, benefits going on here. So benefits, it's a single agent, like I said. It's local AI. There's no latency. And by latency, we mean you don't need to worry about the overhead, the auth, the processing of the cloud to get your intelligence, right? So much of what people are building now is because they can. So you throw everything up to the cloud, even your IoT data, you're throwing up to the cloud without even filtering at the endpoint first, right? You're throwing all this stuff. I go to all these conferences and we're doing so much in the cloud, but we don't even know why necessarily we're doing or what information should be up there because we just sent it all up and now we're trying to get smart in the cloud. So Cylance is doing it the opposite way. We're sending down models and intelligence down to the endpoint where we need to be without the latency so we can get ahead of the bad thing. Automated EDR, like we talked about with playbooks, the ability to anticipate what the bad guy's going to do next and stop them before they get there, and this powerful API I've been talking about. Now we'll talk through just a few of the actual discrete features that I know you're on pins and needles about. Some of you at RSA have seen some of these before. Maybe if you're at PreventCon, you got a preview of this. But this is what it's going to look like, right? Not the photo, but to the left for a second. So one of the cool things about what Cylance is able to do now is give you better classification that has more context around it. So as users, you're familiar with like malware versus pup. And Cylance stops something from executing, and you're super happy about that for obvious good reasons, but you still kind of want to know why. What is this thing? Is it really bad? Was that a worm we just stopped and prevented? Because wouldn't it be nice to walk into the board and say, look, you know that AI thing I bought 2 years ago? It's still working and it's stopping worms. So we want to give back to you some of the enrichment around what we're doing with our AI so that you can message internally and understand what we're doing and make better decisions as analysts. I have a slide about that in a moment. But so we're also introducing what we call risk levels, so you know how to triage better. And our taxonomy, which you do see there in the photo, is represented in the photo. I don't know if it'll appear exactly like that, but we'll show you like, look, this is very similar to things that are in WannaCry. It's also known to have ransom component, and it's wormy, or it's using an embedded portable executable, or it's got aspects of Quackbot and SFX, oh, by the way, and it's using, maybe it's being packed with something. So you see how you can kind of make quick decisions in this kind of cascading taxonomy that we've figured out. We've coaxed this out of our AI. And that's what's so exciting. Our AI is starting to tell us back as a vendor even, let alone you as customers, why it's making the decisions it's making so you can be better analysts. Okay, role-based access control focused, centered around like need-to-know concept based on job functions with much more granularity. You all have been asking for that. We've delivered. Additional memory forensic protections. I won't go into the details of those, but doppelgangers, like when a process is trying to write and right before it writes to disk, it gets interjected and duplicated and then used for malice. Child processes where the parents modified the memory permissions. That's a bad thing. Well, we'll be able to stop that now. Protection from one process modified modifying something adjacent, not the parent, but something adjacent that it didn't even own, we got that, right? So this is new memory defense protections keeping up with the threat landscape. Scalable grouping. This is huge. It boils down to like tags. We want to be able to scale the grouping. That's always been a challenge for every vendor, including us. So now we have a way to do this. We have a way to assign multiple tags or labels, if you will, to each kind of group or thing rather, and then make groups out of combinations of those tags, and then also filter based on those tags. So you get quicker resolution and pivoting through the dashboard to know what you're looking at. Script control. We've been great against PowerShell, one-liners, two-liners, etc. We want to keep up with that landscape. I mean, every week there's probably 5 or 6 different ways to misuse PowerShell and live off the land. We will continue to keep up with that. We have some new stuff that we're releasing with this unified agent coming out. And obviously whitelisting, you guys have been asking to be able to do this by parent process. Okay, we got you, and some new controls around that. So these are the features, right? I've done benefits and features. I did the Kirby vacuum thing. So now we have my favorite part. So we are an AI company, as you guys all know, right? We are now maturing that machine learning model. We have been over the last, whatever, 6th or 7th iterations of our own internal kind of generations of models, if you will. But beyond that, you can't, when you build an AI, you don't just get to go from step 1 on the left and get to step 5, no matter how much money, time, data scientists and technology throw at it. You have to evolve your AI. We started doing this in 2012 when we were at step 1, right? Classifying things and understanding how to predict things, training in the cloud like most everybody else is doing still as well. Step 3, enhancing our models, getting larger feature sets like 3 million feature sets or and a billion samples. But let's focus on step 5 because that's where things get interesting. If some of you follow like the field of AI in general, right, more abstracted, DARPA describes these 3 waves of AI that will come upon us as a human race. Describe, categorize, and explain. When we want the AI to get us better as humans, we have to ask it to explain itself. We have to remove some of the veil that normally might happen in an unsupervised kind of a type of model of training. Now we do supervised and unsupervised. We do many different methods inside of what we do when we build modeling. But just in certain areas, we want to know why it makes the decision it made. In our case, of course, why is this malware actually considered malware? Why should I believe you, AI, right? So we're giving back to the analyst. And the other thing is we're going to give you some interpretable insights that are meaningful to you as an analyst so you actually make real-time decisions in the face of a threat. And then the robustness aspect is interesting as well. You read about adversarial machine learning being able to mess with vendors that are using like basic machine learning automation. And by and large, that's true. The field of adversarial machine learning is actually accelerating very quickly, but we're so far along in our AI. We've been doing this so long, years before the rest of the industry. And I'm fully on a soapbox right now and proud of it, but proud of our data science team. But really, we have so much robustness in this model because of complexity, because of different angles, because of how we're looking at things, because also our data science team spends a lot of time trying to break our data science. They have the right pedigree to know how to break and do adversarial machine learning and other tactics to break us. So we're breaking ourselves always. And we're at a state of robustness now where we're very happy. Let's put it that way. So right, we have this thing, right? We talked about explainable AI. We're fast approaching as an industry the need to have new metrics, right? So we need to be able to have a predictive advantage metric that says the number of days that your predictive AI, whoever you are as a vendor, is able to anticipate and predict the problem it's designed to solve, right? So we want to start measuring that. Why? So that we know if we're getting better against the overall broad adversary space. We know if the cushion of time advantage that we have is getting shorter or longer. In our case, we know it's getting longer. We still have models from October 2015 getting today's most advanced malware out of the box without any connection to the cloud. Let's start measuring that, okay, as an industry. Let's start measuring, too, how long it takes an analyst to make an informed decision based on the ability to have intelligence local on the system and inform that analyst. So you want to make a decision based on confidence. So do you have enough confidence to make a decision fast enough to make a difference? That is the metric we need to start working for. Now, whether that decision is an automated decision or a human decision, break that out and start measuring that as a SOC or as an analyst, as an organization. So the next thing, okay, so this gets us to where an example of where we're going. And if you were at RSA, you probably saw a preview of this where you actually got to step up to the keyboard and demo it even. So yes, I'm speaking about Persona, I'm getting there. So look, we have this fully extensible thing we've built with full API access. It's built on a microservices architecture, which allows us to hot plug and plug in and plug out different machine learning models, different types of feature sets, etc., without requiring an agent update. Right, so we've built this AI platform that it's future-proof by definition, by how it's designed. And then also we have an agent that has optics functionality. It can do anything it needs to do on the agent. So never mind Tanium, we have you covered. You can do all the things you need to do, right? You can push whatever you need to push, pull what you need to pull, get things done. So now if you have like an UABA project, you've had this UABA project going on for 18 months or 2 years now, you have the intelligence that's meaningful about whatever insiders or this or that about coming out of UABA, but can you take an action meaningfully on the endpoint from that UABA intelligence platform that you've built? Well, let's do that now. That's what this API structure is for, right? So allow us to be the actuary to get things done on the endpoint based on your Axiom, based on your other technologies that you're pushing from. So here I go. I'll take a breath and say, I'd like to introduce to you Cylance Persona. Persona best represents, in my mind, right, in our mind, where we're headed and why we're headed there, right? It's an AI-driven behavior and biometrics analysis engine. And that's a lot of crazy words, and as you read them, you still don't know what it is. But let me describe it differently. I came from a DoD field, right? And the idea that I can authenticate a person at a point in time and know that they're that person throughout time is a challenge the DoD never has solved to this day. We have PKI, we have high confidence, we have the ability to revoke a cert, we have trust built in, but it's all still happening at point in time aspects, right? So you can steal a username, password, and even a PKI session because the user is authenticating for you, inserting a CAC card, right? But let's see what happens when we have to answer the question, how do I do this over time continuously? How do I address this password problem when there's 10 billion records out there and all of our passwords are effectively dead? How do I address problems like most people employing two-factor authentication over SMS, which is entirely broken for any kind of meaningful operation where you need mission cadence? How do I address these problems? Well, this is what we're building, Cylance Persona. So benefits kind of slide, right? So top left, it's AI-driven, it's biometric, so it knows who you are based on how you move and the other aspects of like how your arm articulates when it's using a mouse, the distance between keys and how your fingers hit keystrokes, the cadence, the pressure, all these kind of aspects of typing on a keyboard. It uses biometrics in terms of how you as a user interact with your machine. Do I right click and paste, or do I do Control V, or these kind of things? How do I get around normally as a user when I first log on, right? And all of these kind of things come together to create this meta model. Even Windows events and network stuff going on, all these micro models create a meta model, a combined model that gives you a trust score. And this trust score in the middle is front and center for a reason. It's a signal that you finally have that the human being at the keyboard is the human being you think it is. And that's paramount, and from a number of different angles, of course. Insider threat, audit who was at the keyboard after the fact. When you share username and passwords in like DoD or like oil rig environments where you know your users are sharing logged on authentications, wouldn't it be still nice to know whether it was Bob or Sue that was at the keyboard when the big button was hit? From an audit perspective, there's so many other aspects to this, but like kill chain, our user level processes are those things are getting interjected to. It's when we open up Excel with an IQY file that runs something like .NET and inside of the application, all .NET, it's happening in a user level process, right? I want to know when that process is not the thing I thought it was, right? So this is what we're building. So you got a continuous user trust there on the far right, which is the continuous auth kind of aspect I'm speaking to the whole time. It's giving you real-time alerts. So, you know, right after Bob has become Sue, you'll start to learn that pretty darn quickly. And that's a signal, that's your red herring, a canary in a coal mine that says, I have an identity challenge on this endpoint. Now should I take an action with optics? Or now should I feed my UABA? Or now should I step up off you and force you to put in a CAPTCHA or to use a duo authentication token to prove that you're still Bob, right? Because I don't think you are anymore, right? And this is all happening locally on the box. This is not happening later with your personal information that's very private up in the cloud. This is happening via locally unsupervised models on the box. So this is new. I know the vast majority of you are nodding your heads and are salivating like I am. So it's also important when it comes to privacy, and I've been hinting on that, but raw data is not leaving your device. Biometric data is not streaming upwards. Models are trained and scored locally on the device, and the data is not stored up in the cloud, right? So from a privacy perspective, everything Cylance does, and I attribute this honestly a lot to one of my mentors, Malcolm Harkins, who's one of the most wonderful speakers around privacy I know, and provides a lot of thought leadership and guidance to our company and our mission and what we're creating. Everything we do, we don't like to send up to the cloud, and this is very much unlike the rest of industry. All right, so I've said a lot about Persona. You can tell I'm excited. I hope you are as well. We'll be able to reach out to you more about that as it gets further put into the product and released. And there's, Persona is something that it will exist in a certain way in the product, right? Largely solving the stolen password credential problem in the kill chain, which is very much on point for today's security landscape. But it can be and will be and should be so much more as we go forward. And we need you as our customers and our customer base as partners to inform us how something like Persona fits into your 3-year identity plan that you're starting to build out, your 18-month identity plan, or your UABA, your integration, whatever it is. Let us inform us so we can mold this to be what it needs to be, which is a high confidence signal that the human being is the human being the whole time. All right, so we are Cylance BlackBerry. I'll look at the time here. I got about 10 minutes left. So I love this slide because it's these two wonderful shields that we both have had for our existence. I used the BlackBerry for my entire career in the DoD. A lot of you are nodding your heads. I love my BlackBerry. Take it away from my dead hands, right? So, but BlackBerry now is obviously so much more, and actually much less to do with anything to do with manufacturing of handsets, right? So they are building this mobile UEM, and they've built it, and they're building the future of what that means. They're also focused on things like automotive sector in a really, really big way. I think the news just from a couple of weeks ago, if I remember right, I think the Canadian government offered $40 million for BlackBerry to help solve the autonomous vehicle problem space for Canada and the West, right? Because here we are. And this has to do with things like vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to internet, right? Vehicle to X or things around the vehicle, so that vehicles can have that, again, local intelligence to make decisions. You don't want your car to have to go to the cloud before it knows if it should put on the brakes. You need local intelligence, and so BlackBerry's building this out. Now, as you look at these two shields, for those of you on the call that are in the automotive space that already know this about us, we have a phenomenal pedigree in automotive and in security. Everything from production security and incident response to vehicle security to worrying about CANDUS, learning about the entire telematics platform, worrying about the back-end transport of over-the-air kind of transport, certificate authorities. I mean, there's not anything in this space really that we haven't at least touched and have a degree of expertise on. And so when you put these two together, now you have this thing that allows Cylance's skills to expand and influence BlackBerry's platform that they're building. And BlackBerry are already in 120 million vehicles. They own QNX. QNX is one of the most trusted, absolutely the most trusted and secure embedded system for this application there is. And it's not just in just the car, the top tier cars, there's in a lot of the supply chain as well. And so BlackBerry also have other things they have. They have something called Jarvis, which looks at binaries, embedded binaries, et cetera, and breaks them out and analyzes them and looks for vulnerabilities and looks for systemic coding flaws and things like this. Perfect application for supply chain, right? BlackBerry is doing so many things that you may or may not be aware of because they haven't always firmly planted themselves in the quote unquote cybersecurity industry. But if you went to RSA and you looked at our booth, you saw BlackBerry Cylance in big letters, because their full intention is to completely help us carry out the mission and actually protect our mission, which is to protect all the things under the sun, not just the people, but the things. So this also applies to Internet of Things. This applies to OEM and embedded solutions. And again, this is obviously not just anything to do with malware. This is all the AI. This is, as devices stream to the cloud, can we start filtering some of that data before it goes to the cloud? Can you apply algorithms locally to help make better decisions at the edge, much like we do in cybersecurity, but now for autonomous vehicles or robotics or other things, right? BlackBerry has a huge pedigree in healthcare that everybody probably does know about, and many of you on the call also know we have a huge pedigree with healthcare, especially in the way of services. We have a gentleman like Rob Bathurst, who came from Mayo Clinic, who is one of the most knowledgeable folks that would keynote at HIMSS and that kind of thing, that guides a group of consultants that are phenomenal at breaking anything to do with medical devices and patient operational environments, or entire facilities from top-down governance all the way down to device-level security. So we have a huge pedigree as well. So looking forward, what does this mean for you across any industry you're in? At the end of the day, you have the most successful AI company in this space and a massively powerful BlackBerry with ties to government, to all of the G7 governments. I think they're one of the only vendors that can claim that. They're highly trusted. They understand security in their DNA. And you're combining these two forces together in highly complementary ways with very little redundancy. And take my word for it, we've just been merged. And they are letting Cylance stay as an independent business unit subsidiary so that we can keep doing exactly what we're doing for success, but leverage all of BlackBerry's infrastructure, all of BlackBerry's strengths, all of BlackBerry's connections, and all of BlackBerry's wisdom and knowledge around things like automotive and mobile, right? So how can this not be one of the most beautiful marriages ever as we approach an era of AI renaissance? An era of 5G with Internet of Things and even your power meter at your house streaming 5G to the cloud. There's so much geopolitically even going on that make this the right marriage at the right time. And I wish I could stand on a soapbox and scream that out on top of my lungs. This is the right marriage at the right time for all of us. This is what needs to happen, because who else is building a native AI platform, an agent on the endpoint? That is very hard to do. And we've done it, we're bringing it to you, and we're extremely humbled and proud that you guys are our customer base, that we're on, 17 million endpoints now, that we can do things with data and data science that we've never been able to do before because of like this marriage. The future is absolutely wonderful. So please stay with us. I have a few more slides. I'm gonna hand off to Summer again. Summer, are you ready to speak to these?
I sure am, thank you.
Take it away, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to run through just a couple of important things to take away. I want to reiterate that you can always go to cylance.com, resources, user groups, and you can take a look at when our upcoming user groups are and where you can join in. And they're really, really fun, and we'd love to see you at one. You can send an email to usergroups@cylance.com if you'd like to host or speak, or even just to get more information about what we have coming down the pipeline there. And we're happy to answer that for you. You can go ahead and go to the next one. Thanks. Just a couple of resources to keep in mind, and we'll email this out to you in our post-event email. You can go to the support community at any time at support.cylance.com or through your console, and you can post your questions there. You can engage in discussions with our support staff and other users, and you can ask for assistance or log a ticket there to tech support if you need to. We're always online. So you can also, and I highly encourage you if you haven't already, stay current with latest cybersecurity news, and check out our award-winning blog at threatvector.cylance.com. It really is fantastic, and you'll spend all day on there if you really get into it. The blogs are fantastic. If you have questions or need information specific to your account, please go ahead and reach out to your account executive or your technology business partner. We will be answering questions after this webinar again, but if it's something very specific to your environment, that's the best resource to reach out to. But you can also contact for general information about the company or just questions in general, you can call 844-SILENCE, or you can email sales@cylance.com. For the next steps, again, I want to reiterate, there's going to be an email coming that has a survey in it. We really need your feedback so that we can make sure that we deliver value to you in these future webinars. We're going to try to have them once a month for you. Tomorrow is the Silence versus Hacking Exposed Bypassing Next Gen webinar. You still have time to reserve a seat. They are really, really fun. I really highly recommend it. And be sure to save the date. We're going to do this again on April 24th at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and I really hope that you can make it. Thank you all so much for attending. We'll talk to you again soon.